So today we are doing the Fiat standard, which last month we did the Bitcoin standard, and then Mike Compton put forward that he really wanted to do this one, and I said, let's do it. And I got chapter 2 and started to regret the decision because unlike the Bitcoin standard, I really feel like the Fiat standard was a lot more doomy. And as I told Christina as we were texting close to the end of this month, I'm afraid to read it too closely because I find myself being radicalized. And so I've been looking forward to book club to see, did it radicalize anyone else? Is the doomy things that he's saying true or not true? And if you take everything that he's saying at face value, or if you question some of what he's saying. So I'm really looking forward to this. And I guess maybe to start off, what are your general sense about the book? Did you enjoy it? Was it doom loopy? How did it go for you?
I enjoyed it, specifically because when they talked about society and how just different things that he was seeing and how we treat one another, it was like, oh, okay, someone else is seeing those same things, and it kind of put some context to the why behind it, or a possible reasoning to why. Obviously chapter 8 with Fiat food was, we see a lot. That was a wild chapter. I really enjoyed that. I had shared it with my mom. We listened to it in the car together. um and um but when you see, when it talked about just a lot of things, it made sense. I did say I wanted to live in a yurt again and grow more of my own food. And my friends had said that I had lost that goal of mine, because I used to talk about it all the time. I would always look at land, and I had yurt kits all picked out. And after reading this book, I was like, yeah, I'll look at yurts again. Brian?
Yeah, I read or listened all the way through it. I didn't enjoy it as much as the Bitcoin standard. I'm not sure I think if his personality comes off in his books, I don't know, he's just an off-putting guy to me. Like, I wouldn't want to sit down and have a beer with him. I don't think. He's just, I don't know. I think he gets off on being negative a little bit. I think I probably agree with a lot of the basic concepts. He's just, I think he goes too far, whether that's to sell his ideas or whatever. But he's very black and white on stuff.
Yeah, I'll jump off on that part. Because of my work with Monsanto, I had a lot of experience reading activists, and I would push myself to read stuff that I didn't agree with. And one of the things that I noticed was the more that someone used a bunch of adjectives to describe the opposition, the less credible they became to me. And he might have had a point. Like the Fiat food one, I was really interested in that and how our food system changed, but he kept referring to it as toxic waste and sludge and these sorts of words. One, even if they were absolutely 100% oriented correctly, they're not literally true. And so to keep pumping them down my throat makes me both feel really negative, so I'm down and gloomy, but two, it makes me be like, all right, this is in an area that I know something about. There were a lot of things in there I didn't know about, and if this is how well he can pervert this, then it makes me question other things. And so his negativity, I think, made it really difficult for me to come back. I think by the time I was at chapter 3, I was like, I don't really want to open this book up. I feel like it's a chore in a way that most book club books are not. So the food one stuck out to people. Why don't we talk about that particular chapter, and then we can bounce around to other chapters as well. What stuck out to you on that one, Christina?
Well, the one thing that stuck out to me was how the connection to what was the religious
Oh, the
the-
Seventh-day Adventists.
Seventh-day Adventist. And it was really funny because I was listening to that chapter with my mom and we drove past the Seventh-day Adventist church and she's like, look, there they are. Anyways, how people do put themselves into like bureaucratic roles and push their agendas, and that how sometimes I don't want to call people that work for the government minions, but how they can push their agendas just because they're in the room. And so that made sense to me. I kind of thought about it through the context of obviously they brought up eggs and what happened in the 70s, and that really, with the talking about cholesterol, is still something that the American Egg Board is combating today. And they're wondering why too, like why millennials are so concerned about cholesterol and eggs. And I was like, well, we heard it our whole childhood. Like, so like, that's why it's coming up again 30 years later when they're raising their families, is because they just remember all the, like what they heard on television. Like, but that, so like that, and maybe that struck home for me a little bit more because it was my commodity. But we definitely have seen that with small farms getting pushed out, and where they don't feel like welcome. And so that's a sentiment that you see in rural communities. And I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's how they feel. And so, yeah, but I definitely, it was really interesting. I kind of wrote a poem while reading this book, just to like get some of my thoughts out about like ag and different things that I've heard over through like my food system work. And so like this is definitely the lens that they're approaching food from. And I have heard the toxic and the sludge, but when you think about it, that you can get like soda in schools, but you can't drink a glass of whole milk because whole milk is illegal. I mean, but you can drink soda. I mean, they kind of have a point. What did you think about this chapter, Brian?
It probably irked me some because of course I know with the corn and beans, he was talking about me. But oh, I think he, like I said before, he takes it a little too far, a little too stark of a view on it. I think he did talk about, I think that's one thing a lot of people don't know, that one of the reasons sugar from corn is so prevalent is because we've got huge tariffs on sugar, protect our sugar industry, because corn sugar's cheaper. That's the main reason. Ethanol kind of goes the same way. It's the 5-10% is used to make the different grades of gasoline because it's cheaper than the stuff they used to use.
Yeah, so whether that's Michael or Joseph that just showed up, we're talking chapter 8, the food system part. We're going to go to the other chapters later, but this one kind of stuck out to this group. So for me, the part that was surprising, and I don't know whether he was right or not, right? Where they were trying to suggest that the way that they were combating inflation was by substituting these goods that you could make more cheaply. I tend to think that in most of these bureaucracies, almost no one is sitting there being malevolent. They're just doing like what focuses on their one area, literally at the exclusion of others. And the fact that those things happened in tandem, coming off the money supply and margarine getting pushed as a vegetable, alternative to butter, and people being worried about cholesterol and these things, like I am really reluctant to believe that these things happened as some giant plot, and just really believe it's more of like, this is maybe the way that human civilization had to go, right? You're always in that quest for efficiency. You make mistakes, you radically overestimate how much you know about something. And so I felt like he put a lot of, I don't know, like malevolence, where I think it was just people being people.
But I do think for the quest for efficiency that you do lose other things that have like strong qualities. Um, and that you like that in if you say efficiency is like the end all be all, I think that we're losing out on a lot. I don't think efficiency is everything. And I think society or civilization will look back and say, we exchanged efficiency and we were wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think,
agree with that. I think like even the book itself had an impact on me about being like, how much do I really believe a lot of the animal studies, like how to get rid of cholesterol and these things, like not that much.
We ate a
we,
lot more red meat this past week.
when we learned that from COVID, that how easily some of our super efficient processes broke for at least a month or two.
You're on mute, Joseph. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, all the Packers shut down and everybody and their brother was trying to kill livestock in their backyard.
Yeah. Jared McDaniel was trying to talk me into creating a kill floor in my backyard. Well, let's talk about the other chapters. Can you name some of the other ones that, I mean, the food one I knew was like, as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, this is going to be the big one for us. And we can come back to it again. But what other chapters stuck out to you?
Chapter 7 on like, I don't know if you guys are seeing things like this in your communities, but like in some of the smaller cities around us, like just how people are choosing violence or there's increase in crime and that doesn't necessarily make sense, or like in road rage incidents, people are pulling guns, like in Syracuse or even like not far from the edge of the Adirondack Park. And those are things that weren't happening in our areas in the past. And it's not like because you didn't hear about it. It was like these are new phenomenons. Or in Rochester, New York, with the police department and the fire department, like just like their authority or their roles being questioned, and then like just people inciting violence towards like paramedics and different things because they don't think that they're actually there to help. And so there's strange things that are going on, but it's not isolated to just like one city. And I didn't know if you're seeing those that like, or how people are treating each other in your states.
Well, I'm probably the one that lives in the most urban place, and I like violence is way up here. And they were comparing it with other times. I was watching this news program, and they're like, it's probably as bad as the 70s. And then they went and looked it up, and they were like, oh, actually, it is a lot worse than what it was in the 70s in terms of murders and like I thought that struck me while you were saying this about like one of the concepts that he brought up that I thought was really interesting. He brought it up in the Bitcoin standard, but now in this book, he like really hammered on it about high time preference or low time preference. And I think I'm seeing that all over the place now. Like, I think it helps me understand why there's no beautiful buildings being made anymore, right? Like, you see steel buildings, steel and glass, but you don't see stone buildings. You don't see giant, like, contributions that people are making to their communities. And I think a lot of that is, the high time preference of money. And it helps me to understand maybe more of what's going on with how people are building out communities.
I was thinking
Yeah,
about
I
that with
see.
shelters
Oh, go
today.
ahead.
I was just saying I was thinking about that with shop houses today. Like it's a huge trend in our area to build a pole building that's like half shop, half house. And the longevity on those things can't be great. But I mean, I would retire in one, I guess, because then I could just go tinker with things all the time. I also thought about that in regards to children a lot, because, well, there's a lot of obvious things there.
Well, with children, I saw that at my parents' house. My dad has a chair that it was his grandfather's rocking chair when he was a little boy. And like, I don't even know where I would go to get a chair that would be made well enough that it would be passed down to Violet's grandchildren. Like, where would you even go to get that done?
The Amish.
Brian, what were you saying?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess the algorithm keeps feeding me these things because I keep watching them, but like I've stumbled onto financial TikTok. It's like, of course, it's usually some guy who's selling a course or a book or something, but like the advice is so bad. Like I think I told somebody it's go back several years to like the GMO debates, like some of the info is so bad, like you don't even know how to refute it. You know it's wrong, but like you don't know how to argue it because you don't even know like how far in left field they're coming from. But it's preying on people to, you know, I would say not even be rich, but to appear rich quickly. Where I'm with the farm and our kids and everything and that kind of lifestyle, I'm on like the ultra low 20 to 30 year time preference for getting stuff done.
Well, and even that, like, we think of that as low, but in some societies, that's been high time preference. You know, like the that book Lyle was talking about the 200-year process to build a cathedral. Like that's what, potentially involving 6, 7 generations. I mean, right now I'm this 20, 30-year time span seems astronomical to me. Part of that is because of my parents' short lifespan, I think. I'm like, will I actually see the end of this loan? You know, that kind of thing.
I'd be curious of Vance's World Bank days, if he tied any of that to the book.
He was 100% dead on, exactly right on that. Everything he said about those, I had no problem whatsoever with anything he said. And if anything, if I were talking with him, I would be like, you don't even actually understand how right you are about that and how bad it is. And like that I've forgotten about that part actually. When I was making my notes for tonight, like I completely forgot about that. But as I read that, I was like, yeah. And I mean, I was there for 2 years. And by the end of my first year, I knew that I was going to use basically a year to figure out how to get out of there because I was like, this place is bad for me. Initially, I thought this place is bad for me. I don't like being here. And that was after the first year. And then as I started getting deeper and deeper into it, I was like, no, this place is bad. This is like not a good place to be. This is where corruption is happening on a global scale, and these people feel completely empowered to do whatever they want, and they're so foolish that anytime something fails, it was just like all the more reason that they needed to go do it again, do it more, do it with more money, do it with, more force. I think that he implied they have some more level of malevolence. And I think the states, on the state level, there is malevolence there, or not malevolence, just incredibly selfish behavior. But the people that are there are just completely indoctrinated. They cannot see outside of a globalist idea to the degree that like I had almost no friends when I was at the World Bank. Like I had people I like spending time with, but not anyone I would talk with about this kind of economics.
I even see that like at like the local level, like when you take money from like a foundation for like Syracuse Onondaga Food System Alliance, you don't answer to like the people that you're supposed to be helping. You answer to like USDA that funded your grant, or to push that agenda, and or the Allen Foundation, so they can check a box that they are doing DEI, all these other things, but it doesn't actually make an impact on the lives of the food insecure people that you're supposed to be helping. But I only have 3 more months on that advisory board, and I am counting down the days until I don't run again.
Good for you for staying with it. But I think that if I were to compare the ag one to the World Bank one, I think the World Bank one was more accurate than the ag one.
It reminds me, talking about people within those organizations, there was 2012 to 2015 or so, I was with a group of farmers that we went to DC with Dow 3 or 4 times to help get some new trades deregulated. And the way they trained us, and it ended up being true, is you approach how you talk to, if you're talking to an elected person, you talk to them one way. If you're talking to the bureaucrats, you talk to them another way. And if you're at USDA talking to like the scientists at APHIS, then they're not necessarily in it for being promoted or whatever. They're actually serious scientists, and you can talk to them like you think you'd be able to talk to everybody, but basically it doesn't work that way. You're trying to accomplish the same goal, but you got to change your tune depending on who you're talking to.
Sounds like they had it figured out, though.
Yeah, I mean, they have people, of course, that are there all the time. So every morning we kind of have a debrief. Here's everyone you're meeting today. Here's what they do. Here's how you might want to approach that meeting, because they wanted it to be a group of farmers, so they wouldn't go. The Dow people wouldn't go in the meetings with us.
So speaking of these types of trips, and I mean, like, I've spent a lot of time around farm bureaus, it did make me think like the farm bureaus are maximizing off of the money coming out of the system, right? Like, there's a reason why Zippy Duvall goes out and says, hey, we got you that money during COVID, and the farm bureaus are definitely a part of this high time preference movement.
That's why we're the ag elite, Vance. That's what they call us on Twitter. But like it makes me think about like when I was just in New York City, how I was talking with a woman from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and she reached out to me the other day because she has a farmer panel in October, and she said expect an email from me. And so I've been watching for that email, and I'm like, I really hope I'm not selected, because like I've worked myself up through the system, so like I do know, like I do play the political part, but the problem is that sometimes my curious mind gets me into these places where it's like, well, I'm like, oh well, I have time, so why don't I go learn or see what these different groups are doing, or then I'm in a little mixer and talking about food, and next thing they're like, talk to someone from the Federal Reserve, and I'm like, sure, I'll go talk to them just to see what I can learn. And next thing she's reaching out to you on LinkedIn. And so it's like I kept thinking about my time and how I exchange it, and then like, what am I exchanging it for, and like, what is this purpose? So like that was kind of like, as I listened to this book the whole entire time, I'm like, I was just kind of thinking about that. And it's like, is it a good return on investment, or like, what's the end game? Like, what are my goals? So I just kind of like used it to tease out some ideas, but yeah, you're not wrong. But like, it is.
Well, and that goes to the banking thing. Like I'm involved in a community bank, and he basically said people in banking are, slave owners or participating in a slavery system. And that was like, I think that his point of view, you have to grapple with it. And Joseph, I think I saw you say somewhere like, you really have to challenge yourself to say, how much of what I hear in a book like this do I say, well, yes, he's talking about things in theory or maybe the way things could be, but we're also living in the way they are. And what is that balance, and what is that moral balance between, this utopia that he's describing, which I'm certain there's like big downsides to some of the austere nature with which he wants to deal with things, but you're also living in today, not in future land.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes you grapple with some things, like both of you just said. But yeah, that was really my take on it. Like, okay, I'm in this ag system that I've already, a lot of these flaws I've already seen, and it's just another reality check in the road, I guess. Um, but yeah, I mean, I look at, okay, like just my cows. Yeah, I could get them to graze 300 days out of the year, but part of the way I get my compensation is I use equipment from the feedlot. So, do I want to spend a bunch on that land and actually do it the right, efficient way that is most cost effective, or do I want to derive more value from this other thing I'm doing? So, it's just working the system you're in. Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's something I think I started learning how to do that in college, was make the best of the system I've in, especially I switched majors after 2 years. I had to go back and take like a lot of 1 and 200 level classes, which are basically stuff I'd already taken, but in a different part of campus. And like a lot of classes, I learned to just show up on Friday and take the quiz because I could pass it without going to the lecture. Um, just kind of how to use the system, and maybe I followed that into farming some. Like I kind of like, maybe that's in college too. Like I had like zero interest in being in a fraternity and going through all that. So I'm not a joiner, so I'm not in Farm Bureau, but it's not lost on me that even though Brian's not in Farm Bureau, that they're going to take care of the corn and soybean farmers. So I ain't too worried about that.
You're an ag influencer, so you're part of the ag elite. So they'll clump you in with us anyways. Sorry. But no,
We're all together
bringing
now,
up bringing up college education makes me think of the research component of it, and then talking about people who are working on masters and PhDs, and like who's actually going to read your work and will it matter, or like and then just some of the funding behind that research, or who's writing the papers, or who's publishing them. And that well, I know for like research and different things, I hear like, in the United States, we're not #1 anymore, right? China's more, but like who judges that research, or who says they're more innovative, or have we lost our edge, or I don't know, but it just, there are people getting funding that no one will read their work, right? Or a small group will read their work. So that seemed a little relevant.
I think the college stuff seemed really accurate to me too. I think that's why this book is somewhat radicalizing me, in the sense that on the areas that he's talking about, I'm like, oh, he's pretty right about that. Like I think one of the worst things that ever happened in our economy was making it so you couldn't declare bankruptcy on student loans. And that's because it made it risk free. And as soon as you take away the risk of giving somebody money, you're going to create bubbles. And when he talked about all the knock-on effects, and like, who gets roles and what do they do, I think that's totally true. Like the PhDs that are being celebrated and brought into existence, and and how much of that system is funded by NIH or these large government groups. Like, they control what research is getting done, maybe not entirely, but certainly largely.
I know, like, even at Cornell, the number of deans that they have, or just different people that are like in different roles above the professors. There's just so many different ones. And so like the ratio to the students is kind of like off, or like just the amount of money that's being spent at the higher level. Um, and some of those deans were former Farm Bureau staff in New York, or different things like that. Or you have different, no, really, honestly, like one of our lobbyists from Farm Bureau, she's going to become a commissioner in the Department of Ag, a deputy commissioner. So like you see the moves, and even they'll be like, some people will say like, oh, you've been in your job for 8 years, where are you going next? Like, what have you built this all for? Like, where are you going? And I'm just like, I have the luxury of being able to split my time between my passion projects and my so but yeah, like, there's a lot of things. Some people are playing chess and other people are playing checkers, and I don't know what board we're on. Sometimes, like, if it's as sinister as they say in this book, and I don't know if it's as sinister, but I bet Jared McDaniel would tell you it is, but I don't know.
Wes, did you ever get your audio figured out?
Yes, I got to an area where I've got good audio now, so thanks for letting me listen in so far. I found it to be really interesting. I did not complete, probably about half of the last section to complete yet. And I was anxious to hear what you would say about the World Bank and those other activities, or those other organizations, because I think that was horrifying. I never understood when they talk about how these third world countries get into so much debt, and I never understood where that debt was coming from. And that really was an eye-opener in this book as to how these countries are getting into so much debt, and how they get basically they lose their freedom because they're in so much debt to the world organization. So that was really interesting. The ag chapter was interesting for me. I mean, I agree with the comments you were making about how the really extreme adjectives he was using were a little bit off-putting, but as I have done a lot, or my wife especially has done a lot of reading, and we've done a lot of health advice from the Weston A. Price organization. So it was interesting how much of his ag feedback he was pulling from that organization. I was surprised he spent so much time arguing as to what was good health food and what was bad health food, versus just saying this is how we got to the type of food that's so prevalent in our current diet today. I think the other things that were enlightening for me were, I've always assumed that the fiat money system started in 1971 when we went off the gold standard, and to learn so much of the early history of it, how we were really venturing away from the gold standard before the Great Depression, and how that allowed the government to basically have a never-ending slush fund was quite fascinating for me. Those are probably some of my comments.
Well, we
I was
keep
really surprised by the how much he banged that drum of about junk food too. I I hadn't ever thought about the way that government inflated away everyone's net worth to pay their bill. Because I mean, obviously we've seen the federal debt grow and stuff, but until I read, well, I guess the Bitcoin standard, and then this one just talked about it more. I never put together that the way that they get that debt paid off is they just make it into less money by inflating everything.
Yeah, I thought that that was one of the truly brilliant things he did was explain inflation, which is something like I think I knew almost everything that he said, but the way that he said it, I felt was really helpful. And you think about like, I have a podcast coming out tomorrow with John Jennings, who manages billions of dollars worth of wealth. But we had like a 45-minute debate, more or less, on inflation. And like, it was really good. Like, I found that he took all of the things that people always say and he really found a way to rip them apart, and it was like very helpful to me because I had a lot of ideas floating around in my head that have never really been able to crystallize in the way that he did, not least of which is my never ending frustration with the government models on what is the price of things, whether you're talking about the CPI or these other things, like, and his explanation about, you know, how they get set up. But there again, I would say when he really gets worked up, he stops using rational arguments and then he starts using like insulting words. So I yeah, I think his book would be even better received if he wasn't as negative as he was.
One thought I had, and I was listening to the audio book. This is the first time I've done a book on Audible, but so I don't know what the physical book would have had in terms of references and footnotes and stuff like that. But I felt like a lot of his statements were not as backed up as I would have liked them to be. You know, he would make a claim, but not really document whether that was just his opinion or where he was getting that information from. So that maybe was a little bit disappointing. And I didn't know if it was coming from my first experience in an audiobook or if he didn't do that in the physical hard copy either.
That struck me as well. And in acknowledgments, he mentions some people, but there's definitely some stuff. I mean, and obviously it's going to stand out to me the most in ag, but there's vast oversimplifications in there. And I'm sure that was in a lot of things because he talked about some complicated stuff. I was surprised how many acknowledgments he had, and there's a 16:54, like 16-minute 54-second chapter that is just him saying the names of the people who pre-ordered it. I thought that was wild.
I skipped that part.
Well, yeah, I did too, but then I went along with this.
I know.
Wow, just a thank you for all the pre-orders, basically.
Mm-hmm. It's like
Oh
the
man,
second.
I haven't got to that part.
It's like the second to last chapter, and then there's a little afterword beyond that or something.
Well, when he put this stuff out, when he wrote the Fiat standard, the Bitcoin standard was only just barely getting started. Like, it did not hit the wild success that it had. Like, so I imagine now it seems crazy because it's like I don't know if it's a New York Times bestseller, but it's definitely way up on Amazon. It seems ludicrous, but those were all the early backers, right? They bought early.
Well, I know like there's some people that like if they self-publish or different things like that's like on the Kickstarter, like if you give me $25, you get the book and I'll put you in, or if you pay $50, I'll give you a shout out and all the things I mentioned previously. And then if you do this much, you know, you get dinner with me and all these other things. And like that's a common thing.
A couple things that if you want to read the whole thing and not worried about going all the way down his rabbit hole or getting radicalized or whatever. And of course, I have no idea which way it's going to go, but when he's writing these books, Bitcoin was worth like 2 to 3 times what it happens to be worth today. a year or two later. Because what it was like 50,000 a while ago. Now it's under 20, something like that. And then when I would look him up online to see him anywhere else, I know he mentions that Mises Institute a lot in both of the books. Most of the stuff online is him talking at that place, giving like a keynote talk or something. So I couldn't find him anywhere outside his own echo chamber. So that
Oh,
was kind of a
he's
red
legit.
flag for me.
No, he's totally legit.
I think he's smart.
He's
he's
like Mises, going to speak at Mises is no small thing. So that's a program out of, I think, Auburn. Yeah, Auburn.
Mhm.
That's a big deal. But he actually made a name for himself as an Austrian economist, like even way before Bitcoin. Like, it's the thing that's striking about him is that he then took his reputation and betted on Bitcoin, at least to me.
Yeah.
Like, he was a known quantity to me before Bitcoin.
Mhm. And he did that in both books. He doesn't miss a chance to slander a different idea or person. Like, it's not necessarily necessary to the argument, but he manages to squeeze it in there every time.
So I was just gonna say my Aunt Linda's gonna be in town next week, so I was gonna ask her what my Uncle Richard's thoughts are on Bitcoin. Because I mean, if she's gonna come into town, I might as well stir the pot. So I'm very
Did
curious to
anybody's
see.
thoughts on Bitcoin change as a result of reading this book?
Probably should buy some, right? I mean,
What'd you say? Buy the dip? Good time to buy, because you're not buying Brian's $60,000 Bitcoins.
Yeah, I wondered, like, the savings is pointless. That really hit with me. Like, I have a savings account, but it's just kind of money I pretend I don't have. And then when I do my financial statement for the bank every year, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to add that in there. That's earning 0.1% interest or whatever it does these days. Like, sometimes I think I should just take it all out and pay
Well,
off
so
some
this would be a
principal
good
or
group to ask my question. I've been asking this of podcast guests. Do you think it is wise to teach your children to open a savings account in today's day and age?
only
I've
as
looked
a
at that
shelter.
conversation on Twitter. Go ahead, Brian.
Is it just maybe how I'm using it now, just as something I pretend I don't have, like, just in case something happens. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, I had a CD that earned 7%. That's pretty crazy talk these days.
my nephew is 10 and he can tell you how much he has in his savings account to the penny. And then when he gets a statement, it's not, I mean, but he was at my parents' house this past weekend and he sat down and he wanted to work on his savings plans. He grew flowers this summer and he has some peppers and tomatoes that he still needs to sell. And then he'll go through his things and he'll have little garage sales and he's saving. And he was saving for college. He decided he's saving for a car. But like my brother has like apartments, like rental units. And so like if he needs someone to paint, he'll have my nephew paint and he pays him. And so like he has goals, but like he's like, oh, maybe I won't go to college. Maybe I'll just buy a house and then I'll have my first apartment that I can rent out and all these different things. So he plays through different scenarios, but I don't think your average 10-year-old's thinking about buying rental units, but I think it's just because of like who he's surrounded by.
Is this the one with the podium?
Yeah, the one with the podium. Yeah.
He sounds great.
So, but I wish I understood when I was younger, like the potential for my savings account just to like, I don't know, set myself up better. I try not to think about all the money I spent when I was younger in my pet sitting days. Like, I mean, I had a great early 20s, but
Well, I grapple with this question all the time, and I think the answer that I'm coming up with is by the time my daughters are old enough to earn money that they can save, I will likely have them buy Bitcoin and not put it in a savings account, and I'll probably spend my time teaching them how to purchase them and move them, because to me like I even have asked this around a board of directors meeting, right? Like, there's not a single board member here that thinks that people should keep very much money at all in their savings account. Why do we even hold them, right? Like, it's a bizarre thing. We live in a culture where like having a savings account seems silly, other than like you're not risking the money, but you're almost certain to be losing money at 9%. So it's a weird thing, and it wasn't always true. It wasn't always this way.
I think we should go back to a Lindy book or something that's like
I agree. So we're at the
100%
time.
like fiction. Like I
We're
need
at the
that.
time to do a book suggestion. We have one less week than normal to read it, although it's just a few days. I would appreciate a fun one, something light, something that we enjoy. Lindy book. Any suggestions?
No, something like Mark Twain or something comes to mind. I really enjoyed the last one we did of his.
You say Mark Twain?
Yeah,
It's a lot of work.
the Connecticut Yankee, King Arthur's Court.
I would love something in the genre of like a Hatchet, like a Gary Paulson kind of, or like a Seventh Son, that kind of
Yeah.
like younger, there was a
Farmer
while
in
there
the
where we did some
Sky.
of those games. Yeah, or we did some of
Logan's
those books that
Run.
were like middle school kid books.
Logan's Run.
Yeah,
was a good
Logan's
one.
Run was a good one.
I haven't read Hatchet. I probably have it somewhere, or I gave it back, but definitely concur with that genre.
Have we ever read any Jack London books?
I don't think so.
Man, they're great. I love Jack London books.
I take it you're looking some up.
I am. But people can be looking up other things if they have any ideas. The Sea Wolf was one of my favorite books of all time. What about John Barleycorn?
John Barleycorn.
Alcoholic Memoirs. Maybe not.
When was Hatchet written?
That was more recent. That's probably in
Oh.
the 70s or 80s.
1967 copyright from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankenweiler. I enjoyed that book as a child, but it's probably for younger kids. But this is one that I recommended for Violet when you were saying for what books should they read. But
Wes, you got any ideas here?
I won't make you guys read any Jane Austen.
Couldn't get off of mute, but no, I don't have any great recommendations that I can think of.
Well, I would like to do a Jack London book if nobody else has a suggestion here. Why don't we do Love of Life and Other Stories? That sounds like the kind of thing we were looking for. So this is a series of short stories by Jack London. Be easier to get through, give you some experience with Jack London. If nobody has a suggestion other than that, that's what I'm going to put forward.
Did he write Call of the Wild?
Yeah, and White Fang.
So Love of Life.
Yep.
Okay.
And all in favor?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, then so be it.